For those theorizing how Helena was in fact pretending to be Helly and wondering how Helly was going to return to her innie counterparts, well, this episode answers all of that, as Helly does indeed return, but it comes with a sacrifice. Irving's sacrifice. And so it's fitting that Irving leads off the episode. Episode 4 opens up on the outside with Irving. And the elevator ding letting the viewer know that Severance is happening. Now he wakes up on a frozen lake on the ice and he's scared. He's terrified. Imagine if you're expecting to wake up in the elevator and instead end up there. I don't think I would let my innie wake up on the ice, which makes me think that the overtime contingency was flipped a bit earlier than the Audis were told. But anyway, the isolation doesn't last too long for him because he hears Mark's voice. Mark is standing on the cliff out in front of him. He calls out to him and tells him to climb up the cliff. Irving moves as fast as he can on the ice. He quickly makes toward the rocks. He climbs up and he sees Helly. She pops up out of nowhere and he's curious where she came from, but she says she doesn't know. Anyway, they end up meeting Mark and soon after Dylan. And I have to say, I didn't see any of this coming. Last week, we saw Mark. He was getting reintegrated. What is the time frame? Is this the following day or what? One of the things I love about the show is a feeling of being off balance. I can never predict what's going to happen. And I don't watch trailers, which makes it even more jarring for me. Now, next they find a TV on the nearby cliff. This all feels rather dangerous to me, slippery and all. But they make it. And there's an old school setup with a sort of VCR tape. Milchick is recorded and he's speaking. And this whole experience is an outdoor retreat team building occurrence. It's for 2 days and allows them to experience the outside world. They are in the Dieter-Egan National Forest, though no one's heard of Dieter. But they will learn about him as they go on their quest. They have to find a secret text that Keir Egan supposedly wrote before he died. I say supposedly because we can't believe anything Milchick says, or even Lumen for that matter. And to help them on their path are their doubles, acting like directionals pointing to where they have to go. And what are they? Is it a holograph? Are they people wearing masks? I mean, we did see a guy in a goat mask after all. They could be underdeveloped clones. Or maybe animatronic robots like Gwendolyn mentioned. She said they even did a choreographed dance, which is what I'm leaning toward. But why use them? It appears that they're probably using these doubles so that the group could experience having their own twin like Keir did. They just learned that Keir himself had his own twin. They followed the paths and found a book where Keir writes about Dieter, his twin brother. Now they follow this map and they continue to walk while Irving is reading in the background. He's always been the one that's most interested in the Egan family. But the narration reminds me of season 1 when Mark was reading Rickon's book. Curious enough, Lumen asked Rickon to write a book for the innies. Could it be this book? I'm guessing probably not, because it would take time to write the book. But then we don't know how much time has passed between last episode and now, but I doubt it's very long. So I'm thinking that Rickon's book will be something else entirely. Now, on that trek, they stumble across a dead seal. I think it's real, but I don't think it died there. I think the seal was planted. You know, one of the things that Lumen does to the innies is control them. Even this outside experience is contained within the structure of a quest. They have a map. They have to follow a trail. They have to read Keir's book. It's not their own experience. It's so structured that they even get punished. No marshmallows because they laughed at a story. But then Milchick is very sensitive. Helly asks, why does the seal look so messed up? And Mark responds, maybe that's what dead things look like. And I think that's the point, to have them see death so that they don't long for the outside world. Even the end of the story had Dieter die a violent death. Looking back to season 1 when they were playing that ball game, when Helly first arrived, Mark wasn't too motivated to play. He was just mourning the loss of his best friend Petey. He even told Milchick he didn't know if Petey retired or if Petey was dead. He didn't know what was going on. He just wanted to know. And at this moment, Milchick had an opportunity to lie and just tell Mark anything. Tell him that Petey's Audi retired or left town for another job or just anything. But instead, he left Mark with that void and replaced it by praising Lumen.
I think this is a good time to remind ourselves that things like deaths happen outside of here. A life at Lumen is protected from such things. And I think a great potential response to that from all of you is gratitude.
And so I think the dead seal or the horror-filled ending of Dieter's Egan's death was used as a fear tactic because fear is a great way to control another person. And so I think this is a way to equate the outside world with bad things happening. That way they won't want to leave the safety of Lumen. It reminds me of the Truman Show. When he was a child, he told his teacher he wanted to be an explorer. To discourage Truman from wanting to leave, the teacher pulled down a map of the world and says that there's nothing left to explore. And as he grew older, they had to manufacture other ways to imprison him, ultimately using fear to keep him at bay. The powers that be didn't want Truman to leave, just like Lumen doesn't want the innies to leave. Stay at Lumen and be productive. And therefore, I'm curious to see what Natalie gets Rickon to write for the innies. Whatever it is, it will be used as a system of control. During the walk, Helly tells Mark that she wished she knew where they were going. Now, this was the point where I was the most sure that she was her outie Helena. If an innie was told where they were going, it would be absolutely meaningless to them because they haven't been there. They may want to know how far they have to walk, but probably not any specific location. Many people suspected that she was Helena when she lied about her outside experience in episode 1 of this season. I didn't though, but kudos to those who figured it out early. I started to consider this theory when we saw Helena looking at the video of her innie. During the replaying of the kissing scene, she seemed jealous of her innie, though that was probably more about being jealous of her freedom. Yeah, it's kind of weird to be jealous of someone who's never really free, someone who's always in this never-ending workplace. But I think it's more about freedom from what her name brings. It's not that Helena can't get a man. It's just more complicated when you're an Egan. And I think being Helly offers a type of freedom she never considered. But also, before the kiss, I found Helena's reaction interesting. The two were talking, they were wondering, what if we're married on the outside, and they were making some kind of joke. And Helena smiled at it. She thought it was funny. And it was as if she was seeing them as more than just innies. Before she was like, you're not a person, I am. But I think she might have been seeing them as more than that. Maybe it's just because her life seems to be so restricted. Now, Irving pulls Mark aside and tells him that he's suspicious of her. But Mark just can't see it. They meet Milchick and Miss Wong. They show up and they all have dinner. They have this campfire, they have tents. And Milchick finishes the story of Dieter by telling the group about Dieter's brutal death. It's Dieter's punishment for satisfying himself in the woods. Now, Keir watches his brother die, right? Keir watches his brother satisfying himself, and then he dies. So Keir then goes to the waterfall where he sees a tempura woe, a gaunt bride. Now, this story reads like a spooky campfire story that is steeped in very religious overtones. Milchick claims it's real, but no one believes the man at this point. Personally, I don't think there's a brother. I think the twin is actually Keir's inner self, or specifically his inner sinful self. Maybe the part Keir's embarrassed about. Maybe the innies are a reflection of the part of us we're ashamed of, and that's why he has such a disdain for it. At least that's his vision of what the innies are. We see them, they're real people. But it might have been a way when Keir thought about it to separate what he didn't want. And maybe that's the point of this whole thing. Now, Helly laughs at the story. She seems to be the only one who gets it at first, and then Dylan and Mark chime in with laughter. Now, this upsets Milchick to no end, and he orders Miss Wong to throw the marshmallows in the fire. I don't think he knew she was Helena, because if he did, I don't think he would have gotten so irate. And Helena, she seems to be very surprised that Milchick is so upset, probably because she's never experienced this side of him. She's his superior after all. Meanwhile, Irving is observing all of this. And when Milchick and Miss Wong leave, Irving confronts Helena about the night gardener she supposedly saw. Now, this is a follow-up from earlier. Just before the campfire, when Helena visited Irving with a friendly snow seal, he asked her about what she saw and she didn't answer, but her face changed as if she dropped the facade for just a bit. That's really good acting there. Now, fast forward to the campfire moment, and Irving is asking her in front of Mark and Dylan. He is angry at Mark for flirting with her and even mentions Mark's dead wife, which gets Dylan upset. And now it's like 3 against 1, and he's very, very offended by it. At this point, it's not that Irving is upset that Mark is forgetting about Gemma. Underneath, he's upset that Mark doesn't realize it's not Helly. That's what's getting him. Mark is cheating on Helly with this imposter. And this is where Helena clinches it for Irving once and for all. Unlike Helly, this woman says something very cruel to him. She attacks him emotionally and says that Irving is lonely because he can't see Bert. But the way she says lonely is almost like she's talking about herself.
He's really lonely.
There's a cruelness about it. There's an honesty there. It's like she knows that emotion. I mean, I could be reading into it, but that's what it feels like to me. He gets up and storms away. The burning marshmallows encapsulates this entire outing now. Mark and Helly/Helena are getting together in her tent. And now I wonder if the baby in the opening sequence is their baby. Did he knock up Helena? But then Mark sees Gemma, and it confirms that he's been reintegrated. He even has a PD head pain. Not as bad as PD has, but he still had it for like a second. And she notices. He doesn't tell her. Not that he understands what the head pain means, but he didn't tell her about seeing Gemma. And I wonder if she will put it together at some point. Will she spy on Outie Mark? Will he have the same head pain that any Mark had? And will she make the connection? Meanwhile, Irving is in the woods. He calls for Milchick. He gets lost. He falls and his torch goes out. He sleeps outside and he has a nightmare where he sees Bert, the temporal woe, and his desk, in his computer, and on it he sees the letters that are all scattered, but they make out the word Egan. Now his outie knows Helena Egan. Everyone knows who she is up there. And I'm guessing that seeped in when he slept, which is probably why they don't want the innies to sleep. Though there's kind of a part of me that wonders if Irving wasn't integrated. I think outie Irving was talking to Ragabi on the phone. And then we see Ragabi talk to Mark, and she says that she's better at it now, better at this reintegration thing. My question is, with whom has she been practicing on? Could it be Irving? The following morning, Irving finds Helena at the waterfall. He tells her he knows she's an Egan, and he waterboards her to get her to confess. Milchick, Dylan, and Mark are desperate for him to stop as they look on from above the waterfall. Irving tells them she's an Egan and orders Milchick to wake up Helly when Helena says,
"Turn her back!
Dennis, stop doing!
Yes! Do it, Seth!"
Seth. Only an outie knows his name. Dylan knows the name because he heard it from his outie's wife, but he doesn't know who the name belongs to, though he's clever enough to figure it out. But this proves that she's an outie. At this point, Milchick follows Helena's orders. I think he's as shocked as anyone else about her being an outie, and in the end, Helly returns. We even hear the elevator ding.
No!
And Milchick orders Irving to take the walk. It would be his final walk as an innie, and Milchick does this speech about how it would be like innie Irving never existed. Why didn't anyone say it? Dylan or Mark say, "I'll remember you, I'll remember you." I felt so bad. Irving's such an amazing character. I just felt so bad at that moment. But as Milchick is going on, saying all these things about how he's going to be forgotten and all this kind of stuff, it really feels like the walk of shame from Game of Thrones, which I'm sure many of you have seen that. But then Irving closes his eyes and we don't hear the ding. It's the opposite of the beginning of the episode. We hear the ding as he opens his eyes at the beginning when he's on the ice. But in the end, when he closes his eyes, there's no ding. We will see Outie Irving since he has his own story with Outie Bert stalking him. Though I hope at some point we see Innie Irving. If he is reintegrated, maybe we can see a version of Innie Irving on the outside. But this is going to be very hard on Dylan. Irving was his best friend, and even his last words was that he should have listened to him. Those were his last words to Irving. There's going to be some guilt there, along with Mark, who didn't know it was Helly he was sleeping with. And if he knocks up Helly via Helena, that will be kind of awkward. I look forward to whatever comes next. Thank you for watching.